question lingered in my mind. How is this possible without some pretty high frequency energy source, radio frequency in fact, running through my circuit? My audio oscillator was only 1,000 hertz. Hertz or cycles per second. Radio frequency is hundreds of thousands of hertz, and the phenomenon could be produced with an old-fashioned dermatron too. That only puts out DC, direct current, no frequencies at all. A high frequency energy had to be coming from somewhere. Was it me? Ridiculous. But there was a way to test. If my own body was putting forth the high frequency energy, it could be bled off and diverted into the ground with the correct size capacitor. This should stop the feedback oscillations. This turned out to be true. It was stopped. But ridiculous kept ringing in my ears, and I tried another test. The dermatron was invented decades ago and made famous by Dr. Voll. Establishment science disdained it. If there was indeed radio frequency, RF, running through my circuit, I should be able to block it with the right snap-on choke. It did block. I thought of a third test. If this was truly a resonance phenomenon, I should be able to add a capacitance to this circuit and see the resonance destroyed. Then add an inductance and see the resonance return. I did just that. I made graphs of the relationship between capacitance and inductance. They were entirely reproducible. Then why couldn't I see the RF on my RF oscilloscope? Probably because it was high frequency energy, not high energy frequency. Then why couldn't I see the RF on my RF oscilloscope? Probably because it was high frequency energy, not high energy frequency. And I didn't know how to amplify it above the background noise level. It was nevertheless not convincing, yet much too tantalizing to ignore. I thought of yet a fourth test. If I was really producing RF radiation that could be channeled through a circuit, I should be able to interfere with it by adding another RF radiation from an outside source. I added a frequency from my frequency generator, first at 1,000 hertz. Now there was no resonance. It interfered. Did this mean that my body was not producing radiation at 1,000 hertz, or was my 1,000 hertz radiation being matched and canceled? I raised the frequency gradually from 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000 to 1 million hertz. There was no resonance anywhere, and I couldn't draw any conclusions. It was 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, quitting time, but one last look at my generator reminded me it could reach 2 million hertz, and I was just at 1 million. One more quick experiment wouldn't take much time. I cranked it to 1,800,000 hertz, and now a resonance screamed out. Was I hearing things? No more interference. I did it over and over. Why was it resonating now and not before? Had I arrived at my body's own bandwidth, transmission range, and this was the reason it no longer interfered? I found the lowest frequency that resonated to be 1,562,000 hertz. All frequencies that I checked above 2,000, from there up to 2 million, my frequency generator would go no higher, also resonated. A year later, I purchased a better frequency generator to search for the upper end of my bandwidth. Any frequency between 1,562,000 and 9,457,000 hertz could be added to the circuit and produce resonance. It seemed obvious then that the human body broadcasts electrically, just like a radio station, but over a wide band of frequency at very low voltages, which is why it has not been detected and measured until now. Everything has a unique frequency. It was a busy year, now 1989. I was determined to find a bandwidth for other living things. I found them for flies, beetles, spiders, fleas, ants. They were between 1 million hertz and 1,500,000 hertz. Cockroaches were highest amongst insects I tested. Then came a dismaying finding. A dead insect had a bandwidth too, much narrower and near the top end of the same range it had been when it was living, but distinctly present. So it wasn't altogether a living phenomenon. But if dead things had a resonant bandwidth, then maybe a prepared microscopic slide of a dead creature could be used, and my trips to the garden and telephone calls to abattoirs for meat parasites could cease. That was a lucky thought. My first slide was of the human intestinal fluke, a huge parasite, scourge of humanity. I had just found it to be present in the liver, not intestine, of every cancer sufferer I saw. Let me read that sentence again. My first slide was of the human intestinal fluke, a huge parasite, scourge of humanity. I had just found it to be present in the liver, not intestine, of every cancer sufferer I saw. A dead adult parasite had a resonant frequency around 434,000 hertz. Size of that parasite's retia resonated nearby 432,000 hertz, as did its other stages. Dead things still resonated. The entire catalog of biological supply companies, hundreds of specimens of viruses, bacteria, parasites, molds, and even toxins were now available to research with this new technique. Suddenly, an idea bolted out of the blue. If a person were to hold on to the frequency generator while it was generating 434,000 hertz, what would happen to the adult fluke if you were infected with it? I tested this plan the same week on myself, not with the fluke, but with salmonella bacteria and giardia and herpes that I carried chronically. After a 3-minute treatment, I retested myself. I could no longer find them in my organs. There were no emissions at their characteristic frequencies. I repeated and repeated. Were they really dead? Maybe they were just numbed or were suddenly hiding, but symptoms were gone quickly too. My herpes lesions stopped tingling. It was all too simple and unbelievable. But was it safe? Within 3 weeks, I had a reliable data regarding the necessary level of electrical treatment. It only took 5 volts for 3 minutes at the specified frequency. It is not as if you had to use house current, which would kill you along with the parasite. Selective electrocution. In 20 minutes, 3 minutes at 6 different frequencies, a whole family could get rid of this parasite. Cancer cases showed that in a few hours, the universal cancer marker, orthophosphotyrosine, could be banished from their bodies by killing this same parasite. Cancer cases showed that in a few hours, the universal cancer marker, orthophosphotyrosine, could be banished from their bodies by killing this same parasite. Incurable. HIV cases lost their virus in a few hours too. Laboratory retesting for HIV came back negative. Most cases of pain got immediate relief if I could identify the correct bug and have its frequency found by the next office visit. This seemed to be absolute proof that living things had an essential high frequency output of some kind of energy. What was actually happening to the bacteria or parasites? If I could kill something as large as an Ascaris worm or intestinal fluke, then perhaps I could kill something even larger, like an earthworm or flea, something I could see with my own eyes instead of having to imagine its demise inside my body. 10 minutes at a frequency chosen near the top of their broadcast range seemed to anesthetize them, but they didn't die. Later I checked the body bandwidth, the range of frequencies they emit of each. The earthworms had lost a lot of their bandwidth, both at the top and bottom. The fleas seemed hardier. They had only lost a little. However, they did not recover, even weeks later, from this loss. Could it harm humans to douse them with RF frequencies in their own bandwidth? Quite probably, if the voltage were high enough. There was no need to experiment, though, because the parasites we want to kill have characteristic frequencies that do not overlap the characteristic frequencies of a human. In fact, they are far away. See the chart on page 17. So my electronic method attacking illness was born. Find the resonant frequency of a bacterium, virus, or parasite using a slide or dead bit. Treat the living invaders inside the human body with this frequency, and in a matter of minutes, they are no longer transmitting their own bandwidths. They are dead or sick and will be removed by our white blood cells. It was a worrisome